What's up, everybody? How is it going? Welcome back to Keith and Mike Watch Deep Space Nine. This has been a very exciting week over at K&M Entertainment. We dropped our Playmates review of the Starship Enterprise, the original Enterprise, and we're getting a little traction, so there's a lot of new friends here. So welcome to our little brand of nonsense here. Mike, how's it going?
Keith, it's going well. Do you need to take that phone call?
I do not.
Okay. We're very busy here, folks. The phones are ringing off the hook.
It's ringing off the hook. It's like a PBS pledge drive with no tote bags, and the phone isn't to give us money.
We've from the beginning, we've been running this channel really for over 3 years now. We were doing a little teeny show a podcast about David E. Kelley's The Practice. It's still available on the podcast feeds and on the YouTubes, some of it. So check that out if you're interested. But regardless, because of the Enterprise video Keith posted last week, we've been getting some cool organic growth. We'd like to welcome all new people, new eyes to the channel. We don't claim to be experts in any field. We're just two geeks talking about Star Trek and some other stuff. We got some fun stuff on the way. So we'd just like to welcome you. If you are enjoying any of this nonsense, please hit the like button. It clearly helps. Subscribe if you are so inclined, and while you're at it, if you'd like to get in on the ground floor of a budding enterprise here on the YouTube, you can do so by joining our patrons at patreon.com/K&M, spell out that and you can join the likes of Brian Kaufman, Casey Clark, Cloud Lover 69, Jorge Novoa, and the mysterious Alan Zimmerman, CRM Productions, Charles Babbage, and our newest patron. Thank you so much for joining the team, Jason Moe. Jason dropped us some questions, so we will be doing an AMA this month, so stay tuned. Patreon.com/K&M. We appreciate you guys jumping in. You get some fun stuff on the feed, and also you get to just be a producer on this show, and we really appreciate and love your support.
Yes, indeed. Welcome, Jason. Thank you for joining the team. We're excited to continue the conversation, which has been certainly our favorite part of doing this show, both here and on the Patreon, is just conversating, because I promise you guys all know so much more than we do. We're just the ones talking, so we're very excited about it.
Yeah, and speaking of that, Keith, I should say, in the coming weeks, definitely hit the subscribe button, because there might be some different content, maybe a different type of show where we focus less and talk more.
Which, if you didn't think it was possible, hold on to your hat. Here we go. All right. Well, today we are focusing, as much as we are capable of focusing, on the Deep Space Nine episode, Season 2, Episode 5, Cardassians. Very interesting episode. It aired on October. Yes, Mike?
Let's do it before I embarrass myself on the internet more than I generally do. Let me get the pronunciation right, because I've been saying Cardassians, which I'm being told is incorrect. Wrong. Okay. Kardashians, very wrong.
Also very, very wrong.
So Cardassians.
The Kardashians, at this point, probably right this very moment, were trying to pay for O.J. Simpson's lawyers. Okay, yes. So that's what they were up to.
It's getting political up in here. We promised we weren't doing that.
I made no such promises.
I tried to promise for you, and you have ignored me at every turn.
I have a hard no. Yes, so Cardassians.
Okay, I see them on the screen. I Cardassian.
Yes, there you go. Okay. Well, we're only in season 2, so it's fine. We've only done 30 episodes of this?
That's fair.
Whatever. All right. Well, you know what we do every week when we discuss when this episode aired on October 24th, 1993. We have a long-standing tradition of Mike's flawless renditions of the top song for the week. And every week it has been just chef kiss perfection. And once again, here is another perfect rendition of Dream Lover by Mariah Carey. I'm sure by now he's really got it dialed in.
Keith thinks I didn't listen to it, But I didn't. Now I remember the song. Do, 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 do. But Keith, there's only one thing that's better than me jibber jabbering over Mariah Carey's Dream Lover.
Pretty much anything in the entire universe?
No, we steal a segment, reduce, recycle, reuse from our old podcast where I play a cover from YouTube of the song. This is Dream Lover by Allie Caldwell. Only 6,000 views. Check her out on YouTube at Allie Caldwell Music.
Sounds great.
Ooh.
Yes. All right, that's enough to get us a strike, sir. But that's great. Who was that again?
That is Allie Caldwell over.
Allie Caldwell.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Thanks.
Very, very nice. All right. Well, that was so much more successful than I ever expected it to be. I don't know what to do now. I'm confused. That segment wasn't a disaster. But you want to know what also wasn't a disaster? If you went to your theaters this week, you'd be watching The Beverly Hillbillies, the Cloris Leachman Jim Varney classic. No relation. Yeah, so that's what was going on there. Mike, are you ready for the hard-hitting news this week?
Yeah, we're not talking about what was on the... no, I forget the order of this stuff.
Well, I don't have your segment that you never remember on my rundown.
Yeah, when should that go, though, you think?
Oh, you know what? Let's do it now before the news. I'm going to add your nonsense segment to
Guys, on the main networks, we had on ABC, Rockin' and Rollin'. Keith, what time did Deep Space Nine air?
Well, it was syndicated, which means it aired when it aired in your local area, usually in the Burlington, Vermont syndication. It was usually about 7 o'clock.
On NBC?
No, it was ABC usually.
Oh, interesting, because that's not... I wonder what times... this clearly is Philadelphia time zone. Anyway, ABC, we were rocking, of course, the Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. I've Got a Crush on You. But Keith, interesting to me, we also had Martin on Fox, their block we talk about every week. Martin, Living Single, Married with Children. God, that was what I was watching. Mike was all in on the Fox block.
Sure.
NBC was rocking that Sequest DSV. But Keith, interestingly, on CBS, talk about the Wayback Machine and Keith Varney, we had a new episode of Murder, She Wrote.
Yes.
That's how far back we've gone. It was the episode The Phantom Killer. A pretty high rating. People were loving
Murder,
that episode.
She Wrote ran well past that.
I forgot that Murder, She Wrote followed 60 Minutes. I mean,
That's a big slot.
Yeah. And then the movie of the week on CBS was Double Jeopardy.
You as you know, we mentioned before, we're going to focus. We're going to really focus. Here's a way that I demonstrate being focused by pointing out in 1993, Mike, did you know that in my Vermont airwaves there was no Fox?
You couldn't get Fox, huh?
We could not get Fox. There was no local Fox affiliate in 1993. In fact, when Fox took over the NFL coverage, right? Because they didn't have a station, our local CBS purchased Fox's football coverage to show us.
Interesting.
Which, of course, was great. We appreciated them doing that. However, they had a hard out for 60 minutes. So if my New York Football Giants were at a 4 o'clock game and it's going to overtime, tough, 60 minutes.
Wow. Cool.
So there you go. I'm just talking about past trauma. You know how it is.
And well, yeah, last night was some trauma too. Moving forward.
Anyway, so like I said, the hard-hitting news here on October 24th, 1993. Of course, the Weekly World News headline this week was Pope John Paul performs exorcism. And with 6 never-before-seen photos inside, certainly exciting. I mean, I'm so glad they were able to get a photographer in there for the exorcism, because you want it to be documented for legal reasons as well as just entertainment. So that's what was going on in 1993. So let's talk about this episode, Cardassians. Ians. Here we go. This was directed by Cliff Bole, the legendary director on Star Trek who got a shout out in our last episode when they talked about the Cliffs of Bole. Cliff Bole last directed...
On the Cliffs of Bole.
Thanks for that. He last directed Dramatis Personae.
Oh, that was a stinker.
That sure was. This episode was written by James Crocker, who did the teleplay, will write 4 more episodes of Deep Space Nine, and Gene Walande and John Wright, who Gene Walande is mainly an actor. This is his only Trek, and John Wright, this is John Wright's only IMDb credit, period. So I believe this is back when they were still doing open script submissions, so I bet they pitched the idea for this episode, and then James Crocker wrote the teleplay for it. So, which I think is cool, but not as cool as everybody's favorite segment about trivia. Mike?
Now, Keith, waste your time
With what?
With trivial trivia.
Okay. Well, this episode has a couple of firsts and a couple of seconds. The first, or the only first that I'm aware of, this is the first time we hear what the Cardassians used to call Deep Space Nine. Do you remember what it is, Mike?
Not even close.
Yeah.
I remember it happening though, which is something.
Yeah. Well, because naturally, they didn't call it Deep Space Nine because that's a Federation thing. They called it Terek Nor. So that is and that will sort of play moving forward. We might we might have some plot stuff going on there. Might have some flashbacks. Who knows? Let's find out.
This episode, we'll learn if Mike and Keith thought it was if Keith and Mike wanted Terek Moore, or if they thought it was a Terek Snore.
Oh, I knew that was coming. Ouch.
Why did you stop me?
Because the tone of your voice as you began that sentence, I already know. I knew immediately you were going to Terek Snore. Like,
I could have gone, was it a Terek Boar?
It could have, yeah, I suppose. Would that have been better?
Learning that title would have given us more insight into the Terek lore. Should I stop now?
No, I think you got one more in you.
All right, you know what? Let's not go out with a Terek whimper. Let's go out with a Terek roar.
Ah, your terrible puns have cut me to the Terek core. All right, so the next piece of trivia.
Keith, our subscriber base dropping.
It's so funny. It's been going up for a while, and now it's going down. I don't know. I didn't know you could fall as precipitously as that. But here we are. All right. So this is strangely only the second appearance of Garak.
Yeah, that's what I was commenting on the watch along, which you can get at patreon.com/KNM. He's talking to Bashir like they've established clearly a rapport over the past however long, but we've only met him one time, and that was way back early. That was like episode 2 or 3. Yeah,
it was episode 2. Yeah, which I think is one of the advantages of having you on the show, not having seen the show before, because if you had asked me how many times do we see Garak in the first 2 seasons, I'd say I don't know 4 or 5.
Right,
and this is only the second appearance. So you, unless I had told you, wouldn't know that Garak is such an important part of the show.
Well, much more so this week. Like the first time we see him, we understand it's more about the relationship he's building. And there's a little bit of, it's more of a funny sort of espionage plot taking place that episode. There's more kind of, they play it for more gags. But no, I don't want to say gags, but you know what I mean. It's more lighthearted. Whereas this one is they really upped the stakes for him this week, which I think is cool.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I mean, I think that's what makes this episode interesting is Garak's being there. Also, speaking of the most trivial of trivia, this is only the second time we see Gul Dukat physically on the station. We've seen him a lot, but always on Zoom. So this is an interesting element. They finally let Mark Alimo out of the little set dressing corner. They actually let him come onto the set, which was nice. We're probably going to see more of him. And lastly, the star chart scene in Remek's office on Next Generation is seen in the background of the Dukat, Sisko, and Padar scene. Now, Mike doesn't know who Remek is from Next Generation, but from season 1, you could certainly begin some conspiracy theories about that particular star chart being there, because we all know what Remek was supposed to be before they decided to change the plans at the end of season 1. So anyway, tiny little detail, but if you really wanted to like start, Zapruder filming this, you could probably maybe think, All right, so now it's time to move on to what was Next Generation doing. This week, the Next Generation did Phantasms, the episode in which Data has nightmares, and was interestingly directed by Patrick Stewart.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, Patrick Stewart directed several episodes of Next Gen. Not as many as Jonathan Frakes, but he definitely did direct some episodes, some of them were pretty good. All right, Mike, what do you say we introduce some guest stars?
We need to.
Before we go into the screening room. Including many of our regulars, Rosalind Chow as Keiko, Andrew Robinson as Garrick, Mark Alaimo as Gul Dukat. And some new folks this week, Terrence Evan as Proka Migdal, who played, who is the father of the Cardassian boy, interestingly played a mute Bajoran in the episode Progress, looking pretty much the same. But now he talks and has a Cardassian son, and we don't mention the fact that it's basically the same dude. He will also show up on an episode of Star Trek Voyager. We have Vidal Peterson playing Rugal, who also played Datan on Unification Part 2 of Next Generation, and Dion Anderson as Zolan, the butthead guy. What do you say? We hop into our screening room and discuss the episode, Mike.
No.
No?
I want to take a moment, Keith, and I think long-time Deep Space Nine and Trek fans will thank me for this as such an expert.
Oh, as the authority.
And
yes.
while we're talking about guest stars, I think we would be remiss if we didn't have a bit of a fond send-off to a famous guest star
yes,
who we've been wrestling with a lot so far this season, and that's about all I'll say. Our dear Kai Wynn, I'll toss it to you, who's actually knows her work from more episodes, but I noticed it on the feeds today, and
no, this is the first episode that we've done since we lost Louise Fletcher, Oscar winner Louise Fletcher, obviously from Cuckoo's Nest, from Flowers in the Attic, but we of course know her as Vedic Wynn. I mean, I don't know what better compliment I can serve her than she is so detestable. On this show, I want to reach into the screen and strangle her. And that speaks to such an unbelievable talent to be on the screen. And we're just beginning our journey with Wynn here. But to create a character that gets such an emotional reaction right away is just, and with very minimal screen time, with minimal stuff, but every time there's an episode with Wynn in it, you're going to be emotionally involved in that story in some fashion. And Louise Fletcher was a phenomenal actress. We all know this. Also very good on Shameless. Just off the top of my head, the things I've seen her in. So certainly a loss to Trek and a loss to the acting field. She worked for a very long time doing excellent work in lots of different ways. So yeah, definitely a big loss. I'm bummed that she's gone. So safe journey, Louise Fletcher.
And with that, Keith, what better way than to journey into a universe that she poured her heart and soul into. What do you say?
Indeed.
Am I
on camera? I don't know.
No, I've been better about it.
Welcome, new viewers.
You thought that was going to be like a really heartfelt segue, but no, we don't do that.
No, we don't do that. But what we do, I said
Yeah, you
do,
did.
is we talk our way through this episode, which begins in the teaser with Bashir getting some rock to Gino in front of the alien that stole Loaxana's brooch. When, holy moly, it's Garrick.
Do it, Rock the Gino.
Yes.
Boop, ba-doo, ba-doo, bop. It's nice to know that not all Cardassians dress like boring space people. Some of them have a little flair, like our boy here.
He's a tailor. He's a fashionista. That's what he does. He's always going to have
what
some
he
fashion. So they chat about how Garrick's shop can stay open when the Bajorans probably don't want to buy from a Cardassian. Well, behind them, two extras sit behind
What is with
wearing
those
trash can lids
It's
on their heads.
crazy.
That was like, yeah, you can see it there. Those are some crazy ass hats.
I went back and watched it a second time, and for only like 60 frames are they actually even in focus. We catch it a couple of screenshots later.
Yeah, barely. It's the background and alien effects in this episode are through the roof.
Yeah.
Through the roof. I mean, they always are, but this episode specifically.
And just once again, the sets. They keep building sets.
Yeah. Yeah, well, they've got a whole they've got 7 seasons to build. It's exciting. So Bashir continues to tease Garrick about being a spy. Then Garrick spots a Bajoran man with a Cardassian boy. Garrick is immediately curious and introduces himself, but then, there's the trash can lid head.
I mean, look at that. That's rad.
That is a fashion statement, Mike. I will give you $10 if you wear that hat to our next episode.
No, but can you imagine showing up to your trailer? Well, I mean, it's probably not a trailer there, but that's not a walk-on. But you show up to fitting, you're like, oh my God, honey, I booked Deep Space Nine. I'm going to be on this week. And they're like, here is your trash can lid. Actually, I'd be fine with that. Although you can tell your friends that's you, and they'd be like, yeah, okay. Keith, that could be you. That could be 12-year-old you for all we know.
I mean, if only, wouldn't that have been amazing?
This episode would be different. The celebratory nature of this episode would be different.
I mean, do you think we could have gotten through how many episodes of talking about Star Trek without me bragging about that? Like, I brag about what I had for breakfast.
Keith
I
is
would be
trash
so
can head.
insufferable.
Actually, if any of our customs people are watching, has anybody ventured to 3D print a trash can head extra from Deep Space Nine? Because that is a niche custom that I want.
That is a deep cut. But that would, yeah. All right. Customizers, I know you're watching.
My address is available if you email us.
Oh my God. What would Mike do for not a Klondike bar, but a trash can head custom?
Clearly, they've
figure?
made Garrick, right? Figures.
Oh, well, the Playmates made one.
Yeah.
They made an actual official one. All right. So then the boy bites Garrick in the hand. And that is our big reveal out of the
Well, first he goes over and just randomly introduces himself, which is very stranger danger.
And touches him.
Yeah. He
like,
almost deserves
that
guy.
look. Deserves that look. Yeah, no, don't walk up to random boys and touch them, guys. Don't do that. So and of course, we'll talk about it later. So Act 1. Bashir goes to Ops, and look at him hopping so excitedly.
That was fun. When he did that, I was like, that was a really cool choice. That was the last take, and they were like, give us something fun.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And I'm sure they're like safety guys, like, don't you dare. And he's like, I'm doing it anyway.
Don't move while the lift's coming up.
Because that's an elevator, and he's just like, there's a moving set piece. He's like, I'm going to leap. But it's a great screenshot. If you're not watching this on the YouTubes and you are listening to the podcast feed, which you can find on all of your podcast places, if you prefer not to be looking at us while we're doing this, you can also go there anywhere you get podcasts and find it there. But you can you're going to miss the leap that Alex Siddig here is doing. Anyway. So he goes to Ops to fill in our heroes and what happened. Kira assumes it was a Cardassian orphan left behind after the occupation. And then she gets a call from Gul Dukat. Dukat says somehow he's already heard about what happened to Garrick and is now super curious. Dukat says the war orphans were a disgrace and that the children are probably being raised to hate Cardassians. and he wants to use the story to get his colleagues to bring the orphans home. Now, Mike, what did you feel about Dukat's motivations at this point in the episode?
It's sort of what I always feel about his motivations. Exactly what Ben's face is saying here. Like, I believe the words you're saying, because usually he's pretty factually correct when he states what's going on. But at the same time, he always has more context, and you can tell that there's some machinations behind the scenes. So he clearly has a motive here. He clearly seems, and now listening back, because I just watched it yesterday, it's interesting that he has such specific concerns about what's going on with the boy, which I kind of didn't clock it at this point yesterday.
And he knows what happens, because think about it, like Bashir probably took Garrick to the infirmary and then came straight here. So we're maybe like 10 minutes after this happened, and Dukat's already on the phone.
Right.
Like that's real fast. So Bashir and Sisko then go to talk to the boy's adoptive father, who took the boy in and does indeed hate Cardassians.
Yeah, he's got resting grump face pretty hard.
He does. The Bajoran nose is not doing him any favors, but it's a cool design.
It is a cool design, but I will say there's a shot later, and here too actually, where you can tell the prosthetic actually, it wasn't blended well with makeup. Like, this isn't a good shot, but there's another scene where he's not, I guess they were in a rush, and it's quite discolored. Hopefully, I'm pretty sure I got a screenshot. I'll try to remember it when we get there.
Hey, maybe it's just a drinker. You don't know.
Yeah, the Bajoran nose doesn't get red when they are drinkers. It gets brown.
I love you. Mike just declaring canon. I love it. Where was it? Oh, yeah. The father says he just told the boy the truth about the Cardassians, and now he is a Bajoran. And he loves him like he were flesh and blood. Understandably. So we head to Quark's, and a literal butthead with an exposed brain wins at Dabo, and Quark is bummed.
He's also like selling lots of burner phones.
That's true. He's like, you need an iPhone charger?
But then look to his left on the screenshot. That's a completely different monster design, creature design, completely different person. I mean, like, and then...
And I think that is the same person in design, because I doubt they would do another one, of the creature that stole the brooch, Troy's brooch. I think it's the same person, but nonetheless, like, such a cool design, and this guy with his like Golden Girls wig, his butt head, and his exposed brain, like, it's a lot going on there. There's a lot going, but it's interesting,
it's
right?
Cool, yeah.
I mean, think about how many episodes of Next Generation where the aliens looked exactly like humans. They didn't even bother to put like a forehead ridge or like a little dot or something. And here on Deep Space Nine, they're going for it. And I love it. I think it's great. So Bashir asks him about the Cardassian boy. And he says he knows him and that his name is Rugal. Turns out the butthead has a lot of opinions.
He does.
He says that Bajorans treat Rugal badly because they hate Cardassians. So, of course, Bashir goes and investigates, and the father denies mistreating the boy. But Sisko says Rugal should hang out with Keiko while they investigate. And at this point, especially looking back on it, now having seen the end of the episode, Butthead here, it's very strange that he has all of that knowledge and that specific opinion and that little bit of a feint about the guy mistreating the boy, because clearly he wasn't. I mean, unless you're his like general hatred of Cardassians, but I'm wondering if this guy was part of Dukat's plan. If he had been read in by Dukat and said, tell them this to set all of this in motion, because I feel like that's probably what happened, even though it's not explicitly said.
Keith, so this was like a tidbit I kind of it was ringing in my ears during the episode, and I did actually look it up, and I can't believe I remembered to do that. But as this episode was playing out, what kept coming to my mind was, do you remember, I want to pronounce it right, Elian Gonzalez?
Sure.
The like international, it was a big, huge international custody battle, basically.
Right.
That actually kind of, in some ways, paralleled to this very story here. In some ways.
Yeah.
And I was trying to wonder if maybe it was just a ripped from the headlines kind of situation, but it was not. But you want to hear something kind of crazy? Elian Gonzalez was born December 6th, 1993. So a month after this episode airs, he was born, and then would kind of, his story would be told.
And zooming out on this episode itself, it's an episode about war orphans.
Yeah.
Which are, a huge piece of collateral damage that we sort of forget and ignore that come as a consequence of any occupation, of any war. And, we certainly dealt with it in Vietnam. They're called to die. Yeah. And,
well, it also,
of course,
I'm kind of jumping to the end of the episode at the beginning, but that's kind of what we do here. It also raises a question about what you just said, where you said, they weren't abusing the boy. But when you really think about it, like I think about my parents, and I'll share about my father, who was in many ways a great dad, but a flawed human, and he had many, many, many inward and outwardly internal biases. He was pretty racist in some ways, and he was, he struggled with a lot of that. And you don't think about it when you're a kid, but just hearing and being around a lot of that rhetoric does infuse you with some things you will have to reckon with later in your life.
Yeah, for sure.
And so that's bad enough to be hearing that about other races when you're a kid, and I've dealt with those things. But imagine, if you will, if you were one of those, like you had been adopted, and you are one of those cultures that is being kind of, and you're learning implicit bias about your own heritage. That is, you could make a strong argument that is abuse.
I agree with you. I mean, that I think it's not this, it's not physical abuse, it's not emotional abuse, but it's like intellectual abuse in some way, and you are hampering your child with something that they're going to have to overcome.
And what I find interesting too, and this is, once again, I'm just planting a seed for a conversation later.
Yeah.
And I'm really loving about a lot of the plots here in this show, and I think it's why you love the show, is that inherently their anger that these Bajorans feel is completely valid and understandable.
Yeah.
But it's, I guess, when you start to get to attribution, right? So they're attributing their feelings of hatred and to an entire species of people rather than those who were the perpetrators. And so that's an incredibly difficult needle to thread, but there is a specific difference between those parties. I mean, obviously,
absolutely.
Obviously, the parallels to the Nazis, and we always go down that road. I'm not going to make it that huge right now, but same type of thing.
I mean, to differentiate between Nazis and Germans, right? And then our responsibility as parents, and I parent my cat. That's all I parent.
Me too.
But I really try to make these distinctions with them. With Charlie, that buddy, hey, look, just because that dog was mean to you doesn't mean that all dogs are going to be mean. But like making those distinctions, I think are part of parenting, part of being responsible parents, and not making those distinctions harms your child. And I think that as well earned as it may be, I mean, it's like, take what's happening literally today. Like if you're in Ukraine, right? Drawing the line between what Putin is doing versus what the average citizen of Russia who thinks this is nonsense is feeling, versus maybe the soldier who is there, doesn't even know what's happening and doesn't support this, and yet is still participating in it, so has a different level of responsibility. That there are just many different types of responsibility and gradations, and to be more nuanced with your attribution, as you said, I think is what this episode is kind of about. And that when you have exploitation, right, it is easy to exploit exploitation, which we're going to see from Dukat later. That when people are suffering and being exploited, people with bad motives, it's ripe ground for that sort of a thing.
Ted Cruz.
Anyway,
I mean, what?
I'm sorry, what did you say? Tom Cruise?
I said Ted Cruz, but
Ted Cruz.
I'm sure Tom Cruise is guilty of this too.
Yes, well, they both went on vacation.
Yeah.
Okay, so where were we?
This guy's grumpy.
Cruise.
This guy's grumpy.
That guy's grumpy. He denies mistreating the boy. And like I said, Sisko says Rugal should hang out with Keiko while they investigate. And the father says, they won't hurt you. They're humans, not Cardassians. Which is, yeah, that's exactly the type of thing we're talking about. So we begin Act 2 in the infirmary. And Bashir is still working on healing Garrick's hand from a bite. Which means one of two things, Mike. One, either because he was bitten by a child. We're 500 years in the future. I feel like they're able to like heal like a broken leg with a. But so it means either Bashir's a terrible doctor, or maybe he's crushing on Garrick and they have an excuse to hang out.
Once bitten, twice, you're my guy.
I mean, you know, and there's a lot of behind the scenes machinations with this, and this storyline got shut down by homophobic producers.
Oh,
but
interesting.
Oh yeah. So I don't know how much. Might as well because it had already happened. So the producers saw the first episode that Garrick was in, and Andrew Robinson played him in love with Bashir. Just flat out, just did it. And I don't know if it was after the first episode or after some of these more. The producers were like, "Hell no, you better like adjust that."
Oh, interesting, because it was still that subtext is there in this episode, so it must
totally
must
there,
happen later,
and
yeah.
it's so disappointing.
It's
such
riveting
a missed
too.
opportunity.
I find it riveting.
Why could only homophobia prevented this,
especially since they give Garrick so much control in it. He is the puppet master in this little
always,
tete-a-tete,
yeah,
which is awesome.
And it's fascinating, and they should have let it play out. It's just a
I'll
missed
say this for the
opportunity.
writing, before they get cut off the knees. So far, aside from sort of the trill and different things, I would say Garrick in 2 appearances is one of I'm most interested in his story. I want to know they're shrouding a really wonderful mystery around him, and I'm into it.
Yeah, well, buckle up, buddy. Yeah. So
Interestingly,
anyway.
that's what he said to Bashir before they changed it.
Yeah, no.
They were like, "Yeah, no, forget it."
Mistake. Anyway, so Bashir mentions that Gul Dukat and Gul Dukat's desire to save the war orphans. Garrick finds this laughable. He explains that Cardassians, not that kind of laughable.
Oh, okay.
And Garrick says that Cardassians have too much of an attention to detail to forget the orphans. And of course, who was in charge of the withdrawal? Dukat. So I think making a very, very salient point immediately. So Dukat, meanwhile, is Zooming with Bashir, and he wants the boy not to be returned to the Bajorans, but is being all reasonable and stuff. He suggests sending a sample of the boy's DNA to help track down his family. And then Bashir comes... Oh, he's talking to Sisko. But then Bashir comes in and calls bullshit. He asks why Dukat chose to leave the children behind. Dukat claims I was ordered to leave them behind by the civilian government. Bashir, of course, thinks he's lying. And Sisko is pissed about him interrupting the Zoom. That's a great screenshot. That is I'm going to kill you, but I'm going to give you a smile.
On the contrary, it was the highlight of my day. Don't do it again.
I mean, Sisko in this episode is so flamboyantly salty.
Well, this episode and some of the previous ones have made me realize why in his action figure, when he sits on that Sisko chair, why his legs are spread so wide. Because they got to make room for those giant clanking balls he's got.
Well, I mean, that is very true of Sisko in lots of different ways. But it's particular in this episode, he's just he's like that crazy, fun, scary boss.
But yet still gives his crew the rope they need to do what is kind of necessary, but then brings the clamp down.
Yes. But before he does, he tells Bashir to set up a meeting between him and Garrick. So we then go to O'Brien's quarters, and Rugal is there for dinner. And O'Brien is pissed about Rugal being allowed to play with Molly. And we continue to reinforce that O'Brien, while a nice guy, is super racist towards Cardassians. And
I love that Keiko wants none of it, though.
Yeah, she calls bullshit immediately.
She did in a previous episode, too. She does not put up with his nonsense here.
Well, and this is where, again, Deep Space Nine is, I think, over the arc of the show, about war and the consequences of war. And right now we're in a period where we're dealing with the devastating consequences of war and the occupation and the fallout that comes from it, both with the orphans, but also with our hero, O'Brien. Because of the war, he came out of it pretty racist. And you can understand he went through horrible experiences, but also he's not making distinctions. He's painting all Cardassians the same way. And part of this episode is watching him sort of deal with that. But that's part of the trauma of war. It's not just getting your legs blown off or dying. It's this is also a big part of it.
And the Federation actually inhabits an interesting space in that conversation, Keith. Sorry to go down another rabbit hole, but I was watching a PBS special about the United States' involvement in World War II and how long it took for us to get involved, and how we hid behind the excuse of, well, that's a foreign war. We're so far away. We're not getting the news. The narrative was we're not getting the information fast enough. And the truth is that, like many times, it's we don't want to be involved, but we want to protect our interests when it behooves us. And the Federation kind of inhabits a very similar space in this.
Well, and you're in an impossible situation, right? Because you both wait too long and intervene too early. I mean, we've paid the price for both, right? We're still have feet on the ground in Iraq. We shouldn't have been there ever. At the same time, we're also sitting here playing footsies with the Russia-Ukraine war.
But another interesting parallel too, yes. But what we've lost in our current present-day reality is the ability to say, well, the information doesn't travel to us fast enough. We don't have the information to make those kinds of decisions to get involved or not. When the truth is, it's a universal media now. We know
we're getting.
It's instantaneous.
It's there on TikTok.
And so we get involved without getting involved through back channels, right?
What?
And that's what Garrick kind of represents on this show, which is really cool.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, Garrick is serving as the back channel. That's absolutely right. And of course, for who?
Right.
We don't know, who's Garrick operating for?
Right now, it seems like for himself, for his interests.
Well, and we're all operating for ourselves, and that's how we operate as humans. Anyway, it's interesting, right? This is really fun. This is great, world building that we're doing here. So, Rugal, before dinner, prays to the Bajoran prophets, which I think is interesting. But Keiko has made Rugal a Cardassian dish, and he hates it. And at the very least, he can agree with O'Brien on that. Cardassian food is garbage. I think, Mike, is there a type of sauce that would have made that better?
Well, Keith, whereas here, when I like my food, I say yum, yum, yum. There, the yummic sauce is even grosser. But there's a lot of it on the ship, is the little birdie told me.
Oh, well played. Well played. Mike's learning.
Mike's watching this show. Mike
is watching
Mike
it.
on one hand hates that Keith was so right about this. But on the other hand, he's digging. In fact, I've finally got CEO Jen to start watching, so she's catching up.
Yes, she texted me. That's exciting. All right. Anyway, where am I? Later that night, Rugal wakes up to talk to O'Brien. He wants to know what's going to happen to him, pretty fairly. And
O'Brien's like, let me just shut down this incognito browser real quick. Come on in.
Yeah. Oh, God. Close the tab. Close the tab.
Folks, is this the type of cutting insight you like? You can check us out at Keith and Mike That's not it. Patreon.com/K&M.
Yes. You want to pay us to do this? All right. So O'Brien asks him, what do you want? And it turns out Rugal wants to stay on Bajor.
Actually, could I get
because
another
that's his
t-shirt?
home.
Because this one sucks.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, he looks jacked.
He does.
I mean, like Rugal lifts, guys. Rugal definitely lifts.
Rugal's emo as hell.
He's yes, he needs some like eyeshadow and like a tattoo, like a temporary tattoo. Wow.
Gwar.
Gwar?
Sorry, is that dated? They're still going, aren't they?
And nothing is dated on a show that aired in 1993.
You're right.
It's fine. So Rugal thinks that there's something inherently wrong with him because he's Cardassian. And his parents, of course, hate all Cardassians except for him. And Rugal asks O'Brien what he thinks of Cardassian. And O'Brien tries very hard to be reasonable and not racist. And this was like a moment where like he did rise to the occasion a little bit. But we find an important piece of information here that the Cardassians killed 10 million Bajorans during the occupation, which is pretty staggering. But again, reinforces like this was not a TV occupation. This was real. And we've talked about that a lot. So we head to Bashir's quarters. And he's asleep, but awakens to find Garrick over his bed saying, "Come, doctor." The slash fic writes itself. You gotta just let him date, whatever. Garrick,
but this is the second time. Don't forget, there was an episode not long ago where he woke up to alternate version of Dax in his bedroom saying,
"That's true,
come, doctor." So clearly, if you get startled awake at Bashir's room, you're getting some nasties. Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, I mean, either Bashir needs to get a better lock or not. I mean, I think
you might ask, why is there no security? But then you realize that little blue vase ain't a blue vase at all, Keith. That's Odo, and he likes to watch.
Took a little blue pill out of the blue vase.
Let's keep going forward.
Oh, this is gross. Garrick wants to go to Bajor. So Bashir goes to ask Cisco, who's wearing the fanciest jammies.
I was going to say, stop the presses. Everything, I said it on my watch long, everything Ben Cisco is doing, wearing, saying, everything is working for me. I want
so
to be Ben.
I mean, those jammies are so fancy. They can get married in those jammies.
Yeah,
like those are crazy.
Those come, one of the Vedics gave him that. No, Kai Wynn gave him that.
Well, you know, it's that type of episode. Maybe they had a little dalliance and she left it there. He's put on that hat. Anyway, Cisco is very salty in this episode. And Bashir's asking for a runabout. But then...
And he says his best line here, he goes, "Oh, will one runabout be enough?"
Snap. I'm telling you, Cisco is... He's feeling
it's like a mini deep V. Look at that. It's deep, but it's mini.
It's like a faux deep V. I mean, maybe it has a zipper and you just like go all straight.
Keith, if I had
it
in me, I would right now. I'm not going to do it, folks. So don't get excited. I would mask your shirt out and just put that on you. I bet I could do it.
I'd look good. I'd look good. Yeah, let's face it. All right. Then a message comes in from Dukat. It turns out that Rugal is the son of a very powerful Cardassian who is already en route to the station. There you got the DNA. Bashir realizes that Garrick already knew, and that's why he wanted to go to Bajor. So lots of people here know a lot more than we do as this happens. So they head off.
Well, that looks familiar.
No, I think that's a different one. Or a different angle. But yeah, Bajor's beautiful. Look at that waterfall in the middle of the city.
Yeah.
Like that's
they animated it too, because that waterfall was moving.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a matte painting with animation, and I think those people were moving as well. And I don't know if that's CG at this very, very early CG, or whether they actually did animate, or it's layering stuff. I don't know. It's pretty cool. Obviously for a painting, but you roll with it. The 90s were a time where you just rolled with a matte painting. It's fine. So Garak and Bashir show up at a Bajoran orphanage. They ask about Rugal, and Bashir clearly did not have time to brush his hair. I don't know if you have a shot of that, but Bashir early in this episode, his hair is everywhere. Whatever. Garak and the woman at the orphanage spar, and we find out that the records that they're looking for are on a broken computer. And surprisingly and mysteriously, Garak is able to fix it almost immediately. Pretty interesting for a tailor. Then a couple of other Cardassian orphans arrive asking if they're being taken back to Cardassia.
That eyepiece was awesome. It's like the first VR.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's, or AR.
Yep.
And we're going to see more of that.
I also like that this was a second time in the sort of overarching episodes, well, the whole series, I guess, at this point, where they make a really strong point about the Cardassians and their record-keeping prowess.
Yeah.
Remember in the duet episode,
That's
they
right.
made a big deal about that, like he was the head record keeper at that camp. So this is an interesting, I thought there was some tie there with Garak, but maybe there is moving forward. Who knows?
Well, and I think in tie into our real world, the Nazis kept meticulous records. And that's why we know so much about them, is because of all the unbelievable amount of record keeping they did.
Well, folks, you don't collect all the Playmates action figures without keeping a little spreadsheet, because you need to know.
Yeah. I also have a spreadsheet. So thanks for that analogy. But then the orphans arrive, and it's kind of heartbreaking because it's other Cardassian orphans are like, "Are you going to take us?" They're like, "Nope," which is tough. But but Garak gets the computer working. Yeah, I mean, I thought that seemed terribly sad.
Yeah.
So we begin Act 3. On the runabout, Garak starts investigating the data he took, but Bashir stops to confront him and asks him what the hell is actually going on.
I also learned that the runabout set's bigger than I thought. I thought it was just that cockpit area, but apparently they got the whole GD thing.
Yeah, well, and the runabouts have like a back room in the back where there's like a meeting table. We saw that on Next Gen. Mike wants a runabout.
Somebody has built this. Me and Keith keep joking about it. Someone has built this runabout thing, and please invite us. We'll pay for our own flights. We just want to come sit in it and record an episode from your basement bunker runabout.
Ooh, I mean, I'm already recording from my basement bunker, but that's there it is. So it turns out that Rugal's Cardassian father was one of the civilian leaders who decided to leave Bajor, and thus was a political enemy of Dukat. Then Dukat is super interested in the boy. And Garak gives us one of his great Garak quotes. "I believe in coincidences. Coincidences happen every day, but I don't trust coincidences." So
Good read,
there it
buddy.
is.
Good read.
Very, very. Oh yeah. Well, I'm auditioning for Garak in the musical.
But give me that face.
All of my lines are here, very arch. Yes. Oh, I'm Garak.
So good. So good.
So then the civilian leader, Padar, shows up at O'Brien's quarters looking for his son. He says he last saw his son when he was 4 and thought he was dead. And O'Brien tries to gently fill him in on what's happening, including that Rugal hates Cardassians and doesn't want to go back. And Padar says that family is everything and that he should have tried harder to find Rugal, but thought he had died in an explosion. In a very sort of like heartfelt scene there. And Padar is obviously very different from Dukat here. Then Rugal and Keiko show up. He tries to reach out to his son, but is rejected. And I think it's a terrific performance
Yes.
by Robert Mandan here. Such like open-hearted honesty in his performance under all that Cardassian makeup. That was an excellent performance. But Rugal is still a hard no. So later, we go to Sisko's office, and the two prospective fathers argue about who gets Rugal. Sisko offers to mediate, and they both agree. Then, Odo calls and says Dukat has arrived. And in what must be a new set, or at least a new angle, Dukat claims he's only there to help the Cardassians get their kids back. And Dukat keeps saying, think about the children, which anybody who says that, I don't know. I start to question your motives immediately.
That's fair.
Meanwhile, Garrick and Bashir realize that Dukat probably deleted the files on Rugal because there's something there he doesn't want people to see, because they couldn't find his files anywhere. They've been deleted. And Garrick says they need to track down whomever wrote the file, and he knows who it is because he's good at these sort of things. So we head back to the custody hearing, and Sisko questions Rugal. Very briefly, that scene looks much happier than it was.
He's like, you just got such a beautiful face.
Wait, was that your Sisko?
In this scene, yes. That was his sort of like creepy. Moving forward.
Meanwhile, Bashir questions the lady who wrote the file on Rugal. Turns out that Rugal was actually turned in by a Cardassian military woman who worked at Tarek Nor, and that Rugal came in with a name. And both of these things are very rare in this situation. So they head off to the hearing, and Bashir starts asking questions. Bashir's like barging onto the Zoom. He's barging into the hearing. He's like a part of it now. That's what he's doing. This whole thing will ruin Padar's political future, the father, and that they are about to be on trial in Cardassia. There's about to be a trial on Cardassia about the people who set up the attempted coup on Bajor from the Circle trilogy. So we're starting to see a little bit of tying here, so that there's going to be a trial about that, and Dukat is a key witness in that trial because he was probably behind what was going on. So lots of political intrigue going on in Cardassia that this is all being tied up in. Bashir then shows that Dukat intentionally stashed Rugal at an orphanage to use against Padar later. So,
but we don't. Here's where Mike had the big question. Still doesn't know. So, was it an act of convenience, political convenience, or did they kidnap the kid, or we don't know? Because remember, he thought he got blowed up. The dad thought he got blowed up. So, was he kidnapped first and brought to the orphanage, or was it just it turns out he wasn't dead, and then instead of returning him to the father, they were like, you know what, let's use this opportunity?
I don't know. I don't think it's established. I think it really depends on how nefarious you think Dukat is. Did Dukat kill this guy's family and steal his son?
So as a writer, do you think that is a wormhole, or do you think that they left it vague so that we are still on the fence, teetering about Dukat?
I think the latter.
Yeah.
I think for a couple different reasons. One, that level of intrigue is important, and I think keeping us questioning where Dukat is coming from, both what does he want, is he like how dark of a bad guy is he? I also think that at this point, had he intentionally killed this guy's family, I think that would be sort of irredeemable from Dukat. I think that would make him just into like a hard villain as opposed to a mysterious villain. I think that would just be too much. Whereas I could totally buy, something happens, he sends his folks out there, they discover Rugal, and they're like, ooh, we can use this. And now, of course, that's a horribly villainous thing to do, especially if you start thinking about it from Rugel's perspective.
Right.
Like that is brutally awful for a thing to have done. But my guess is that's probably what happened. But I don't think it's super clear. So Sisko decides to give Rugel back to his father, and that Padar has found a way to protect himself from Dukat's plan by keeping the whole thing secret. So basically makes a deal. I won't tell everybody what you did stealing my son and throwing him in an orphanage if you don't tell him that I had him or left him. And I guess like what? And maybe I think I'm just forgetting something. And somebody in the comments leave it below. But like, why was having this son such a political liability to this leader?
Well, because he's the one who ordered them leave the children behind, apparently. Just get off, we need to get out, leave the kids.
Well, no, I think that was Dukat's decision.
No, he said that he wanted to get them out and that the civilian leader said, no, leave them. Well, that's what he said anyway.
That's what he said. Interesting. Well, I
Keith
think
and Mike don't quite get it.
I've only seen this episode like 17 times. Somebody smarter, leave a note in the comments.
Well,
and
regardless
explain this
of who's
part.
smart or not, like I also am a bit confused on it. And we've had this a couple of times. Like, so we'll talk about it in wormholes. I don't know that it's a wormhole because I think there's a bit of vagary for the purpose of keeping it ambiguous.
Yeah.
But also I think sometimes things are so politically, I don't want to say overcomplicated, nuanced, that it's tough for just a 45-minute watch to really get all of the nooks and crannies.
Well, and especially because of the way the Cardassian government is structured, like who's really in charge, what are the politics of it? It's complex, and it's intentionally complex. So I get it. I think perhaps I'm just putting my own standards of like.
But I think long and short of it is both of these guys have done some not great things, and they've reached a stalemate. They've agreed to have a stalemate to keep both of their political aspirations. So one of the great lines here, and I think it's either Sisko or O'Brien who says it, I believe. Maybe Garrett, I forget who says it, but they're like, really in this situation, the only true victim is Rugel.
That's right. That's right. And we finish this because they give Rugel back to his father, and Rugel is not happy about leaving. And it's kind of a bummer. And you can sort of understand the decision, right? You totally get it. At the other hand, like you're right. The real victim here is Rugel and the other orphans, and that just being harmed by both sides, by all sides of this, as an utterly innocent victim. And that's like we said earlier, that's the consequence of war. So finally, Bashir and Garrick have tea, and Bashir asks,
look at that screenshot. How sad is that?
Oh, it's terribly sad. It's good performances by everybody there. Bashir asks Garrick, what's the truth between you and Dukat? Because clearly there's Dukat sometimes knows who Garrick is, sometimes doesn't. It's very murky between the two of them. And Garrick says in another great Garrick line, I don't believe in the concept of truth. So we continue not knowing what's going on there. And Bashir is up for it. Look at him. He's like, yeah, this is it. Oh, right. And of course, Garrick goes off and starts complimenting somebody else's clothing. So I wish they should have let him date. Anyway, let us move forward to a certain quiz that we all enjoy.
And now it's time for Mike and Deglio's Star Trek Vocabulary Quiz.
Okay, Mike, tell me, what is Terek Nor?
Keith, Terek Nor was the original name, or the Bajoran name, for, just kidding, Cardassian name for Deep Space Nine. Tarek Noor.
Yes, yes, indeed. All right. Your next thing, explain to me, what is the Cardassian civilian government?
Well, they were another government made up of civilian leaders, not military leaders, who were calling the shots, I guess, once down on the ground during the occupation. And once they were tasked with pulling out, they had to, I don't know, something like that.
Look, some of that's true. The military was the one on the ground doing all the things, whereas the civilian government made the decision to leave. But as we will see, the battle between the civilian and military governments on Cardassia, the power struggle will continue and is part of their culture. You want to know what's part of our culture? The way that we come along home at the end of every episode. Okay, here we are at Quarks. Everyone can tip their glass of Coke Zero in an old busted New Jersey Devils cup, even though I'm a Bruins fan. Here we are. Let's talk first. Mike, were there any wormholes in the plot?
Well, I mean, I'm sure that someone in the comments will explain the political goings and ons about the stalemate that's reached at the end, because that does confuse me a little bit about what was the actual... So I think we're agreeing, you and I, that the actual plot, Dukat's plot, the Duplot, is purposefully ambiguous. We don't know if he purposefully kidnapped the kid to stash him, or if it was an act of political convenience that the kid was available to him, and so he pushed... Because clearly he didn't even do it himself. At least he was smart there. He made one of his minions on Tarek Noor take the kid to the orphanage. So that's wormholeian, if you ask me. But I don't know if it's completely out of... And then I guess the other confusing wormhole type thing for me is I don't really understand how galactic adoptions work, because they had to establish a mediator to decide who gets the kid. But in reality, I mean, he seems to have been officially adopted, even though his parents were like kind of grumpy, but they had raised him, and seems that they legally adopted him from an orphanage, a Cardassian orphanage. So,
well, but they legally adopted him on Bajoran laws. So
right.
This is like a state thing, right? Because like I think it's terribly murky, because you have an international incident, you have laws that apply to both of them. And so you kind of do need a mediator, and I think it's, yeah. I mean that part didn't bump me. What bumped me about it was the Cardassians' willingness to negotiate, willingness to have it be mediated. Whereas I think that most of the Cardassians that we've seen thus far would just like bye.
Yeah, and I guess I would say that like I'm sometimes surprised, and maybe I think it's hubris that Dukat so willingly thinks he can pull the wool over Ben's eyes all the time. Like he thinks by requesting a DNA sample and then just being like, oh, we found who the kid's dad is, that Ben will just roll over. He really thinks he can dupe him every time. But
well, I don't think he's I mean, yes, I see what you're saying, but I don't actually think that he's trying to dupe them. I think he knows Sisko's responsibilities as a diplomat.
Yeah.
And so I don't think he's necessarily thinks he's fooling anybody. He's just knows that if I say these things in a certain way, diplomatically, he has no choice but to take me at my word. From that standpoint. And of course, like, with Dukat, there's always the question of what does he believe, like, is what he's saying a lie? is what he's saying a lie for Sisko's benefit or somebody else's benefit, or is what he's saying maybe a lie to himself? You know, that one of the defining characteristics of Dukat, and we haven't really gotten into this too deeply thus far, but that his self-justification is such a big part of his identity, that his need to justify to himself for his own sense of self-worth, his own terrible behavior. Like, does he believe it's a bad thing? Is he convinced? It's complex, and I think it's interesting.
You got anything else?
No, I mean, not really. I mean, I think it's it's compressed, right? The story that they're telling is very sort of compressed and very quick, and because you've only got 46 minutes to tell it. But I think the ambiguous parts are ambiguous by intent,
right?
And that I get that this all was a ploy going here, and like I said, it's Dukat is exploiting exploitation, and that is messy and much more possible than it should be. All right, so let's do our best moment.
Sure, I'm going to take this down, put this up. So I have an interesting one this week, Heath.
Okay.
We spent a little time on it when we were discussing the episode. In the scene with Keiko, O'Brien, and Rugal at the dinner scene.
Yeah.
This is my favorite scene because I think it tells so many stories and draws so many sort of introspective parallels to our existence when it comes to race relations. We talked about it. I won't belabor the point. But where I really appreciate Deep Space Nine is because they make a point, and then you could kind of leave it there, which is what a lot of television does. But then they go that extra layer, right? So in this scene, ostensibly, Keiko calls out Miles' sort of implicit bias, right? And his sort of, I guess racism is
Just
fair.
Flat out racism, yeah.
And so, she's sort of highlighted as a moral, she's put on a moral pedestal, right? Obviously, he's wrong, she's right? Black and white,
right?
Easy peasy. But they don't stop there. They want to show, I think one of the things I like about this series is that it's not always black and white. It's not always just like television, good guy, bad guy. There's nuance. For sure. And just like the dad seems to be a victim here, but he kind of stepped into what the son, unfortunately, was collateral damage, right? When you get involved in these things. Anyway, but in this specific scene, so, okay, Keiko's she's the good guy in this scene. But wait. She does what she thinks is right. She's trying to be an ally, to use current terms. She makes that Cardassian dinner, replicates that, which actually becomes deeply offensive to him because in trying to do the right thing, she didn't go the extra depth to really explore what was going on, and so she made a foible, right?
Yeah.
And so it makes that extra point that just knowing what's right doesn't always mean you're going to do what's right. You can
or attempting to do the right thing.
Right.
Doesn't mean that you're always going to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. I just really liked this sort of mini story that told in a character beat. And so I'm going to award it my favorite moment.
Yeah, I think that's really well articulated, really well spotted. Because I think that's exactly right. Keiko was right, and then she was the well-intentioned person who accidentally did the offensive thing, even though you were trying your best. Yeah, I think for me my favorite moment was the performance of Robert Mandan as the Cardassian father. In the conversation with O'Brien and then meeting Rugal for the first time, I think his performance was so heartfelt and heartbreaking and complex because he it's an impossible position to be in and a very different. I can't even imagine what that would be like for a father in that situation. And of course, like you said, he's ostensibly sort of the good guy, and yet, regardless of whether or not it was their decision to leave the orphans behind, right, because it was going to embarrass the government, even if that weren't true, he was in the government participating in this brutal occupation. So, he's not coming out of this good anyway.
Right.
Even if he didn't do that. And so it's it's a complex character and dynamic and really difficult decision that happens at the end of the show to give Rugal back to him. Yeah, so I liked that, loved that performance. Just a great performance. It's a great scene. And again, this is, and I guess we might as well just get into the episode rating as we're doing it. Like, to have these thoughts and feelings be the star of the show. It's not always pew pew. It's not always like, here's a giant alien gizmo that's like turning people inside out. This is like the intellectual version of that. So, Mike, you go first. Self-sealing stem bolts.
Yeah, I loved the plot. I really loved the story. I love the story they were trying to tell. I really love the Garak character. I like sort of the way he uses Bashir to shield his the advancement of his skills and what he might be. I appreciate all of that. Like you said, the compression, I feel, causes some issues in the storytelling. Like, I think there are some beats that could have been a little bit longer. I really was looking forward to the Ben as mediator situation. Every time we've had mediation type episode, going back to that Dax episode, the Trill episode early on in season 1, I always find those fascinating because it scratches sort of our courtroom procedural itch a little bit. So I was looking forward to that. We don't get much of it. I find some of the the Cardassian interpolitical conflicts pretty interesting. I felt that way during the coup trilogy. I felt that way here, but we don't get a lot of time to focus on it specifically. The Cardassians have always sort of been kind of in the background, even when they are the focus of the episode. So the compression of the storytelling does sort of harm it a little bit for me, because I feel like this really would have benefited from the room to breathe. That said, great performances across the board, especially cool that a lot of our characters, they let us focus a little bit on Bashir. We haven't seen Odo in a couple episodes. We barely get any Kira or Dax here, so it's neat that they shifted focus. I'm fine with that. We got some awesome costuming. It looked beautiful. Not ton not to like. I think it's going to pay dividends going forward with the buddy cop stuff. I'm sad to hear that it changes course or focus, at least, but whatever. I'm going to say it's a really solid episode. I'm not jumping out of my seat, but I really liked it. Do you happen to tell me what I rated last week?
Last week, you rated a 79.95 for Invasive Procedures.
Oh, I feel like I went really high on that. That feels maybe because this feels like I liked it more, but I don't want to flirt with 80 because I feel like.
Well, I mean, 80 is a B-, so.
I'm going to give it 80.
80. Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think that it's an interesting episode. It does some good sort of storytelling about again, exploring the occupation, exploring the Cardassians and the Bajorans. I think what do we gain here, right? We learn a little bit more about Garak and Garak's relationship with Dukat. We see the Bashir-Garak relationship continue to grow. We learn a lot more about how the Cardassian government works. That I don't know if we knew at this point that there even was a civilian government, or that there was a military and a civilian government separately. So I think that was interesting. We might have, I just don't remember. Performance is great. I like that they subtly paid off a little bit of the Circle trilogy by having, it wasn't like a big part of the plot, but it was motivating the plot behind the scenes, right? What is Dukat trying to accomplish here? He's trying to cover his ass for the mess that happened with the Circle. So if you really think about it, he stashed Rugal there as his get out of jail free card for when I fuck up, right? Which he did with the Circle. And so he's now playing his card to have gotten away with that going so badly. And that story was told very around the edges, right? That wasn't explicitly said, but that's definitely what happened here. And so that's, that level of subtlety where you're paying off something that wasn't super obvious and yet internally it makes sense. I liked that. I liked that a lot. Is it one of those like amazing, phenomenal episodes? No, but I think it's once again an important, foundation laying episode, as well as calling our attention to something real.
Yeah.
Right. And something important and something with real human consequences that we don't like to look at or think about too much. And yet it is our responsibility to do so. And so I like that we're drawing attention to that. I'm going to give it 81 self-sealing stem bolts. It's a good episode. It's not a great episode, but it's a good episode. So that's where we are at the end of this. If you enjoyed our nonsense, you can support us on patreon.com/KM. Join these fantastic folks, get bonus episodes. You can watch Mike watch the episode of Deep Space Nine right in your feed. There's some really fun stuff up there. So we thank you. We thank all of our new subscribers. Give us a like, give us a subscribe. And next week, we will be talking about Deep Space Nine, Season 2, Episode 6, Melora.
Cool.
So, I'm not going to say too much about it yet. So
I
Mike
don't
can
want
watch it
less,
fresh.
Keith. I want Demora.
Demora? Melora.
Oh, yeah. My bad.
Whatever. It's fine. We will see you back here next week. Thank you for watching. Till then, this has been Keith and Mike Watch Deep Space Nine.
Thank you for watching K&M Entertainment. If you enjoyed our particular brand of nonsense, please like and subscribe. Or become one of our patrons at patreon.com/KNM.